11번.
Nearly everything has to go through your mouth to get to the rest of you. From food and air to bacteria and viruses. A healthy mouth can help your body get what it needs, and prevent it from harm with adequate space for air to travel to your lungs and healthy teeth. And gums that prevent harmful microorganisms from entering your bloodstream. From the moment you are created, oral health affects every aspect of your life. What happens in the mouth is usually just the tip of the iceberg, and a reflection of what is happening in other parts of the body. Poor oral health can be a cause of a disease that affects the entire body. The microorganisms in an unhealthy mouth can enter the bloodstream and travel anywhere in the body, posing serious health risks.
12번.
Kids tire of their toys, college students get sick of cafeteria food, and sooner or later, most of us lose interest in our favorite TV shows. The bottom line is that we humans are easily bored. But why should this be true? The answer lies buried deep in our nerve cells, which are designed to reduce their initial excited response to stimuli each time they occur. At the same time, these neurons enhance their responses to things that change, especially things that change quickly. We probably evolved this way because our ancestors got more survival value. For example, from attending to what was moving in a tree, such as a puma, than to the tree itself. Boredom in reaction to an unchanging environment turns down the level of neural excitation so that new stimuli, like our ancestors' hypothetical puma threat, stand out more. It's the neural equivalent of turning off a front door light to see the fireflies.
13번.
A remarkable characteristic of the visual system is that it has the ability of adapting itself. Psychologist George M. Stratton made this clear in an impressive self-experiment. Stratton wore reversing glasses for several days, which literally turned the world upside down for him. In the beginning, this caused him great difficulties. Just putting food in his mouth with a fork was a challenge for him. With time, however, his visual system adjusted to the new stimuli from reality, and he was able to act normally in his environment again, even seeing it upright when he concentrated. As he took off his reversing glasses, he was again confronted with problems. He used the wrong hand when he wanted to reach for something, for example. Fortunately, Stratton could reverse the perception, and he did not have to wear reversing glasses for the rest of his life. For him, everything returned to normal after one day.
14번.
Anthropologist Gregory Bateson suggests that we tend to understand the world by focusing in on particular features within it. Take platypuses. We might zoom in so closely to their fur that each hair appears different. We might also zoom out to the extent where it appears as a single, uniform object. We might take the platypus as an individual, or we might treat it as part of a larger unit such as a species or an ecosystem. It's possible to move between many of these perspectives, although we may need some additional tools and skills to zoom in on individual pieces of hair, or zoom out to entire ecosystems. Crucially, however, we can only take up one perspective at a time. We can pay attention to the varied behavior of individual animals, look at what unites them into a single species, or look at them as part of bigger ecological patterns. Every possible perspective involves emphasizing certain aspects and ignoring others.
15번.
The adolescent brain is not fully developed until its early 20s. This means the way the adolescent's decision-making circuits integrate and process information may put them at a disadvantage. One of their brain regions that matures later is the prefrontal cortex, which is the control center, tasked with thinking ahead and evaluating consequences. It is the area of the brain responsible for preventing you from sending off an initial angry text and modifying it with kinder words. On the other hand, the limbic system matures earlier, playing a central role in processing emotional responses. Because of its earlier development, it is more likely to influence decision-making. Decision-making in the adolescent brain is led by emotional factors, more than the perception of consequences. Due to these differences, there is an imbalance between feeling-based decision-making, ruled by the more mature limbic system, and logical-based decision-making by the not yet mature prefrontal cortex. This may explain why some teens are more likely to make bad decisions.
16번.
Despite the remarkable progress in deep learning-based facial recognition approaches in recent years, In terms of identification performance, they still have limitations. These limitations relate to the database used in the learning stage. If the selected database does not contain enough instances, the result may be systematically affected. For example, the performance of a facial biometric system may decrease if the person to be identified was enrolled over 10 years ago. The factor to consider is that this person may experience changes in the texture of the face, particularly with the appearance of wrinkles and sagging skin. These changes may be highlighted by weight gain or loss. To counteract this problem, researchers have developed models for face aging or digital de-aging. It is used to compensate for the differences in facial characteristics, which appear over a given time period.
17번.
The decline in the diversity of our food is an entirely human-made process. The biggest loss of crop diversity came in the decades that followed the Second World War. In an attempt to save millions from extreme hunger, scientists found ways to produce grains such as rice and wheat on an enormous scale. And thousands of traditional varieties were replaced by a small number of new super-productive ones. The strategy worked spectacularly well, at least to begin with. Because of it, grain production tripled, and between 1970 and 2020, the human population more than doubled. Leaving the contribution of that strategy to one side, the danger of creating more uniform crops is that they are more at risk when it comes to disasters. Specifically, a global food system that depends on just a narrow selection of plants has a greater chance of not being able to survive diseases, pests and climate extremes.
18번.
Many of the first models of cultural evolution drew noticeable connections between culture and genes by using concepts from theoretical population genetics and applying them to culture. Cultural patterns of transmission, innovation, and selection are conceptually likened to genetic processes of transmission, mutation, and selection. However, these approaches had to be modified to account for the differences between genetic and cultural transmission. For example, we do not expect the cultural transmission to follow the rules of genetic transmission strictly. If two biological parents have different forms of a cultural trait, their child is not necessarily equally likely to acquire the mother's or father's form of that trait. Further, a child can acquire cultural traits not only from its parents, but also from non-parental adults and peers. Thus, the frequency of a cultural trait in the population is relevant beyond just the probability that an individual's parents had that trait. Early cultural evolution models used the similarity between culture and genes, but had to be revised, since cultural transmission allows for more diverse factors than genetic transmission.
19번.
When we see something, we naturally and automatically break it up into shapes, colors, and concepts that we have learned through education. We recode what we see through the lens of everything we know. We reconstruct memories rather than retrieving the video from memory. This is a useful trait. It's a more efficient way to store information, a bit like an optimal image compression algorithm such as JPG, rather than storing a raw bitmap image file. People who lack this ability and remember everything in perfect detail struggle to generalize, learn, and make connections between what they have learned. But representing the world as abstract ideas and features comes at a cost of seeing the world as it is. Instead, we see the world through our assumptions, motivations, and past experiences. The discovery that our memories are reconstructed through abstract representations, rather than played back like a movie, completely undermined the legal primacy of eyewitness testimony. Seeing is not believing.